Hello, my dear friend. Today, we are going to explore a very special world, a place where trees not only stand in silence, but are truly communicating with each other through their breath, their scent, and the invisible air currents that we rarely notice. Have you ever wondered if those vast forests have their own language, a mysterious way of communication that we have yet to fully understand? Join me on this journey, where trees not only exchange information, but also share life through the fleeting fragrances that pass by. Don't forget to subscribe to the Smart Sleep channel to explore more mysterious stories like this every evening, helping you relax and drift into sleep with ease. Let's listen to the forest's breath together and feel it in each breath of our own. When you think of a forest, the first image that comes to mind is often a peaceful space where tree trunks stand tall, branches sway in the wind, and sunlight sparkles through the canopy. But what if I told you that within this silence, the forest has a very different life, a language that we cannot hear, a communication that we cannot see with our naked eyes? Would you believe it? Try to imagine a world where trees, beings that have stood still for thousands of years, can talk, exchange messages with each other through gentle breaths, through invisible air currents that only the creatures of the forest can feel. When I talk about the breath of the forest, you might think that it's simply what we feel when we stand in the lush space of a forest. The cool breezes passing by, the gentle breaths carrying the scent of damp earth, the smell of plants, the sounds from the roots drawing up water, the exchange of oxygen through the leaves. But this is only a small part of a much larger picture. The forest is not just a place that contains grand ancient trees or fields of lush grass. It is also a community, a miraculous ecosystem, where every living being, from trees to animals, participates in a lively game that they have never stopped connecting in. And the way they connect with each other is through breathing. Trees, as we understand them, are not like humans or animals. They cannot move, cannot make sounds, nor change their position to find food. But trees have their own way of communication, a way that we can feel but find it difficult to explain with ordinary language. When a tree starts releasing chemical compounds, a light fragrance spreads in the air. It is not merely a simple physiological reaction. It is a message, a signal sent to other trees in the area. And perhaps it is also an invitation for other creatures to come to pollinate or protect the tree from predators. But the breath of the forest is not just the scent. It is also a complex exchange, a silent conversation between the living beings in the forest. Have you ever thought that trees could sense changes in the air, in the climate, or even in their surroundings? Like when a storm is approaching, the trees in the forest have the ability to sense these changes through molecules in the air. And from there, they can alter their breathing patterns, the way they emit gases, to protect themselves and help each other in times of danger. It is a delicate language, one that, if not careful, we would never notice. When talking about the breath of the forest, we cannot ignore the way trees interact with other creatures in their environment. Trees do not simply stand there in silence, but they are actually communicating with microorganisms in the soil, with animals, and even with each other. The root system can connect trees through an underground network, where microorganisms and mycelium fungi act as pathways for transmitting information. Trees under attack can release a type of gas or chemical to warn the surrounding trees, so that these trees can prepare their defense systems. It is a protective system, very subtle and intelligent, that trees have developed over millions of years. Sometimes, on quiet nights, when you step into a forest, you can feel the atmosphere, sense the life happening silently around you. Not everything that happens in the forest is visible to the naked eye. Every breeze that passes can carry messages, micro changes in the ecosystem, warnings, or invitations that the trees are sending out. Imagine you are standing there in a vast space, and around you, every gentle breath, every thin current of air is telling you stories that you have never heard before. The forest is not just a place where we find peace, but also a treasure trove of secrets that we have yet to decode. Trees in the natural world have very unique ways of communicating. They do not need sound. They do not need words, but they can convey powerful messages through passing scents, through the gentle movement of leaves, through each breath they exhale. This is how trees communicate, a form of communication that is quiet, not hasty, but very profound. And if you pay attention, you will realize that each tree, each species, has its own story, its own way of breathing, its own way of existing, like a melodic tune that only the forest can play. It is a world that we, with all our curiosity and affection, still cannot fully understand. But that is exactly why it is so magical, captivating, and worth exploring. So, if you feel tired, if sometimes life feels too noisy and suffocating, try to imagine yourself in the middle of a forest. Let the breath of the forest carry you into a space of quietude, where there is only the rustling of leaves and the soft breezes passing by, so that you can listen, feel, and understand that even in that stillness, the trees are telling you a wonderful story, a story that you can learn from, a story of life and existence. And then you will understand that life never stops talking, never stops spreading, whether you hear it or not. Let the breaths of the forest lull you into a deep sleep, a dreamy sleep, where you can forget the worries of life, and all that remains is the peace and quiet of nature. Let the breath of the forest rock you to sleep, because in each of those breaths, there is a story waiting for you to discover, a story that only you can understand when your heart is still enough to listen. When we begin to understand that the forest has its own way of communicating, you might wonder, how can trees talk to each other if they cannot move, if they cannot make sounds like humans or animals? Well, the breath of the forest, the air currents, the scents, and the changes in the space around them is the language they use to exchange information. And this is a story that many of us have yet to fully uncover. Let's continue exploring this miracle together. As we know, trees are not like humans or animals. They cannot speak with words, nor can they move to search for food or protect themselves from danger. But over millions of years of evolution, trees have developed unique survival strategies, and one of those strategies is communication through scent and air. Recent studies show that trees are not just standing still in one place. They are actually creatures capable of sensing and responding to their environment. This is not a mysterious ability, but a wonderful biological mechanism that helps them survive and thrive in a competitive world. One of the first forms of communication that trees use is the release of chemical compounds. When you stroll through a forest on an early morning, the air might be thick with the smell of damp earth, the scent of fresh grass, and these fragrances are not there by chance. Every tree has its own distinctive scent, not only to attract insects or other animals, but also as part of their communication process. In particular, some trees have the ability to release strong fragrances when they face danger, like when they are attacked by pests or when there is a change in environmental conditions. This fragrance is not just a defensive response, it is also a message, a warning to surrounding trees that they need to prepare for a fight for survival. When a tree faces an attack from pests, it may release a gas called ethylene. This is a gaseous compound that can stimulate nearby trees to produce chemicals that act as protective agents, helping to prevent the intrusion of enemies. Trees in the area immediately become aware of the danger and begin to prepare for battle. That is how trees communicate with each other, not through words, but through a complex chemical system that we often overlook. And these messages do not stop at the trees. They can also be transmitted to other creatures, such as insects or animals, so that they can perform their functions, protect and maintain life in the forest. Not only that, but trees can also communicate by releasing volatile compounds, like terpenes, a group of organic compounds that create the distinctive fragrance of a forest. These compounds can be an invitation or a warning. For example, pine trees release terpenes to attract pollinators like bees and butterflies, aiding in the pollination process. At the same time, damaged trees may release a specific type of terpene to deceive herbivores into thinking the tree is diseased or seriously injured, causing them to leave and stop attacking. One of the miracles of the forest is the way trees connect and interact with each other through their underground root system. Have you ever thought that beneath the surface of the soil, there is a complex network taking place that we cannot see? This system, especially through mycelium fungi, not only helps trees exchange water and nutrients, but also enables them to communicate with each other. The root system allows trees to talk to one another, sharing information about changes in the surrounding environment or potential dangers. Trees can send signals about water shortages, nutrient deficiencies, or warn of threats from pests or climate changes. In this way, nearby trees can adjust their growth patterns or decide to release protective chemicals. Imagine for a moment that you're lying in a forest, feeling each gentle breeze, the scent of earth, of trees, and the dry leaves rustling in the wind. If you listen closely, you will realize that the air is not just a passing breeze. It is part of a silent conversation, a message from the trees to you. And if you pay attention, you will sense the magic in every breath they take. When you stand in the midst of a forest, you don't just feel the stillness of nature, but you can also feel the vibrant life happening around you. The trees are not just standing there. They are living, breathing, exchanging, and communicating with each other in a language that we have yet to fully comprehend. The forest, in its own way, is not a simple place to relax or find peace. It is a living organism where every tree, every species, has its own unique role. Each tree has a task, a function in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. When trees communicate, it is not just a simple connection. It is part of the life, growth, and continuity of the entire forest. This is how the forest continues to exist, to grow, and more importantly, how it continues to sustain life for other creatures, from the tiniest animals to us, humans. For millions of years, trees have learned to communicate with each other through breezes, passing scents, and the air they exhale. They do not need sound, they do not need words, but they can still convey powerful and clear messages. This makes me think that perhaps sometimes we are too hasty, too noisy in our daily lives to notice the subtle, delicate signals nature sends us. The forest has taught us that not every conversation needs words. Sometimes a glance, a breath, or a silent exchange is enough for us to understand the message. So, do you want to hear the stories the forest wants to tell? Take a moment, breathe deeply and let the breath of the forest lull you into sleep. These stories are not just what you can see with your eyes. They are what you can feel in every breath, every passing breeze. And once you understand the language of the forest, you will realize that each sleep is not just a time to rest, but a journey of exploration. An interesting conversation that you are always invited to participate in. Listen, feel, and let the forest tell you stories you have never known. As we delve deeper into the magical world of trees in the forest, we begin to realize that their communication is not just a simple response to the environment around them. In fact, life in the forest is far deeper, more complex, and subtle than we might have imagined. We need to relax and allow these stories to slowly unfold. When I say that trees release chemicals through air and fragrance, this is not just a biological phenomenon. Each breeze, each scent in the forest carries a message, a signal, a vitality that cannot be seen with the naked eye, but is incredibly clear in every breath of the trees. Let me take you further on this journey, where every breeze, every puff of air tells its own story. When you stand in the forest, have you ever thought that the air around you is not just simple molecules, but that it carries stories from the trees, secrets being breathed out bit by bit through chemical compounds? The forest is not just a place that holds life. It is an invisible space of communication, an environment where trees not only live and exist, but are also exchanging information with each other through molecules in the air. This is a world that we can feel, but only when we stop, pay attention, and listen to the breath of nature. The trees release chemical compounds through the air and fragrance, and this is not a random response, but a part of the marvelous life mechanism that the forest has developed over millions of years. These gas molecules can float in the air, travel far, and reach other trees in the area. Each tree has the ability to create a unique chemical compound with different purposes. When a tree is damaged, such as being attacked by pests, it will release a warning gas. This is a message sent to the nearby trees, telling them that a danger is approaching and they need to prepare. In some cases, when trees are attacked, they not only warn each other, but may also release a chemical to call predators of the pests to help. This could be a miraculous survival strategy for trees. They are not just victims of external factors. They have a very special way of protecting themselves and maintaining life in this challenging environment. When you imagine lying in the forest, you can feel the air changing, each gentle breeze brushing your skin, carrying unfamiliar scents. This is not just a comforting sensation. In fact, these are chemical molecules exhaled by the leaves, the trunks, and the roots of the trees. These molecules carry messages from the trees, sending them to other trees in the area, signaling a change in the living environment. This fragrance is not random. It is part of the complex communication system the forest has developed over millions of years. This is how trees help each other, protect each other, and together maintain life in the ever-changing natural world. Imagine a storm approaching. When the wind starts to pick up and the air in the forest changes, trees can sense these changes through shifts in the air. They may begin to adjust how they release gases, excreting protective compounds to sustain their life while facing the storm's devastation. They do not just endure this change, but instead, they are talking to each other through changes in how they breathe, through the molecules they release, so that all together they can overcome the challenge. This shows an important point. Trees are not just silent beings. Every time you look at a tree, remember that inside it is a complex communication system, a way to respond and adapt to the surrounding environment. The forest is a place where trees and other creatures can communicate, not only through fragrances, but through changes in space, in the air. It is a silent conversation, but incredibly powerful and clear. Trees do not only use chemical compounds to communicate when they are attacked, but even in peaceful times, they engage in quiet conversations through gentle breezes and passing scents. Trees in the forest will release compounds like terpenes, the compound that creates the distinctive fragrance we recognize when passing through a pine forest. This is one way trees attract insects, like bees or butterflies, helping them perform their pollination function. Through these molecules, trees are not just calling other creatures, they are also communicating with them to accomplish reproduction and continue sustaining life. But another interesting thing is that trees can also adjust how they release gases based on changes in the environment. If the climate changes, if there is a shift in humidity or temperature, trees can adjust their breathing patterns, altering how they release compounds and gases to match the new conditions. This is not just a simple physiological reaction, but a marvelous way for trees to continue surviving in a constantly changing world. A life in which trees not only live to exist, but also actively adjust their breathing and communication to sustain long-term life. When you sit under the shade of an ancient tree in the forest, you can feel the tree's breath through each gentle breeze. Trees in the forest are communicating with each other through invisible currents of air. The trees are talking to you, even though you cannot hear their words. The air molecules, the fragrances, the changes in the air, all contain the messages of life, growth, and the continuity of a tree community. You may not fully understand everything happening around you, but you can feel the life in that space. Feel that every breeze passing by is part of the ongoing conversation between the trees and the soil, between the trees and the other creatures in the forest. So, when you return from your journey in the forest, remember that you did not simply experience a peaceful and quiet space. You listened to the stories the forest wanted to tell. Through the breezes, the fragrances, and the gentle breaths of nature, let these messages continue to exist in your mind, lulling you into sleep, taking you into a world of peace and quiet, where trees and nature are not just living entities but companions on your journey to explore life. As we continue our journey into the breath of the forest, I want you to imagine that you are in the middle of a cool, green forest. It is not just the trees and land around you, but also the subtle communication happening. You can feel the air dense with fragrances, and though you cannot see it, you know that each light breeze, each movement of the branches, is part of a silent language. But beyond these messages, through air and fragrance, trees have another, very special form of communication. That is through warning and conveying danger in their environment. Let's explore one of the most important roles of scent in the world of trees. Warning of danger. When a tree is attacked, it does not just simply endure these impacts. Instead, it responds with a subtle reaction, not only to protect itself, but also to protect the other trees around it. Trees do not just face their own enemies. Each time they are damaged, they send a warning message, like an alarm to the other trees. Danger is near. Be prepared. This is not a coincidence, but a very intelligent survival mechanism, allowing trees to survive and continue to grow even in harsh environmental conditions. You may wonder, how can trees detect and react to danger without eyes, ears, or the ability to move? The answer lies in the special chemicals that trees release when faced with danger. Each tree has its own sensory system, through which it can detect when it is attacked. And more importantly, it knows how to help each other. When a tree is attacked by pests or herbivores, it can release a chemical called jasmonic acid, a powerful signaling molecule. This molecule not only prevents further pest attacks, but also warns the nearby trees. This compound can alter the physiological processes of trees in the area, helping them create protective chemicals. You can imagine it like an urgent signal sent through the air, a soft but clear message. Be cautious, danger is near. And so, the surrounding trees immediately become aware of the situation and begin to prepare for the attack. This system is part of the magical information network that the forest has developed over millions of years, where trees do not just fight alone, but cooperate, helping each other overcome challenges. This is particularly evident in the plant world, when a tree is invaded by pests or damaged by external factors like storms or strong winds. It does not just endure. The tree will begin to release a special fragrance, not to attract beneficial animals or insects, like those for pollination, but to warn the nearby trees, asking them to alter their chemical structures to resist the attack. You will never see this change, but if you pay attention, you will sense a very gentle air movement, as though each breeze carries invisible messages. Just like other trees, the trees in the forest really know how to protect each other, not just protecting their own life, but also the community, the ecosystem they are building. This not only reflects the intelligence of trees, but also shows that in the natural world, every creature is interconnected. The breezes, the passing air currents, are not just the movement of air, but they carry alarm signals, warning of danger and calling for help from other creatures in the ecosystem. Imagine for a moment that you are lying in the forest, and in that quiet space, you can feel a gentle movement, a shift in the air. You cannot see everything, but you sense that there is vigilance happening. There is preparation for a battle ahead. The trees are talking to each other, even without sound, without noise, but the message is clearer and more powerful than ever. You may not hear it, but you will certainly feel the movement in the space, the change in the air, as the trees send out their warnings. This is similar to how we, humans, react to danger. When we feel unsafe, we may protect ourselves. We may call for help or seek assistance. Trees do the same. When they are in danger, they emit a warning signal, not only for themselves, but also for the other creatures in the area. From this, an invisible yet powerful protective network is formed to safeguard and sustain life for an entire community. But did you know, in the world of trees, the warnings are not one way. Animals can also sense the changes in the air. For instance, pests not only detect when trees release chemicals, but they can also adjust their behavior to avoid trees that have sent out warning signals. The fragrance is not only a part of the biological process in trees, but it is also a part of a dynamic linking system where every creature plays a vital role in maintaining life. Through these scents, trees are not only talking about danger, but also about changes in their living environment. If the environment changes, if the climate begins to warm or cool, trees will respond in their way. These messages do not only stop at warning pests, they also signal that changes in living conditions need to be made, that adjustments in growth and development must occur to adapt to new conditions. It is a continuous adaptation process, an ongoing conversation between trees and the natural environment. And in this moment, as you hear these stories, imagine yourself lying in the forest, relaxing, breathing deeply. You may not see these things, but you can feel the change in the air, in every breath, in every passing breeze. Each tree, each species, has a role in the ecosystem, and they are protecting each other, helping each other survive and grow. It is a magical system that we cannot see, but we can feel it in every moment of stillness in the forest. We may not understand everything happening in these forests, but we can certainly feel that every time we breathe, every time we listen, we are part of this story. The trees are talking, and they are telling you. Listen and understand that every breath we take is part of a life that is constantly changing and growing. And as you continue to relax, while listening to the little stories of the trees and the natural world around you, I want you to imagine that you are lying in a forest. Only the soft moonlight is shining down, and the space around you is calm and gentle. But even though you cannot see, you can feel the breath of the tall trees exhaling around you. You feel the warmth, the protection of this forest, a place where trees are not merely stationary beings. They are active, communicating, and one of the most important ways they do this is by attracting other creatures into their ecological circle. And to achieve this, fragrance becomes an indispensable part. Let me tell you how trees use scent to attract and entice other creatures to come to them. When you step into a forest, sometimes the first thing you notice is the scent. It could be the smell of damp earth, fallen leaves, or the rich scent of pine resin in the air. But in the world of trees, fragrance is not just something random. Scent is part of the language that trees use to attract other creatures to them. These creatures could be insects like bees, butterflies, or even other pollinating animals. Each species of tree has its own distinctive scent, like a signature, an invitation to the creatures around. Fragrance is an integral part of the reproduction process for trees. As you might imagine, trees cannot move on their own. They cannot seek out pollinators or carry their seeds far away. Instead, trees have developed a wonderful strategy, using scent to attract creatures that help them in the pollination process. Insects such as bees, butterflies, or mosquitoes are attracted by these scents, helping the trees carry pollen from one tree to another, thereby sustaining the life and growth of the species. The miracle is that each tree species has a special fragrance. Imagine walking under the shade of pine trees, and a light scent of pine resin gently spreads in the air. This is how the pine trees attract insects, through the chemical compounds found in their resin, or the fragrance of jasmine or lavender flowers. All of these are secrets that trees reveal through each breeze. And not only animals are attracted to these scents, but even other trees may respond to them. For example, pine trees can release their fragrance to warn other trees in the area about changes in environmental conditions, so that all can adjust and adapt together. So, why do trees use fragrance to attract these creatures? The answer lies in the fact that their lives are intertwined with cooperation and interaction within an ecosystem. Trees that can attract pollinators will have better reproductive success, thus helping their species grow stronger. Fragrance is part of this process, not just a simple scent, but a clear signal, a call in the natural world. Trees do not need to speak or move to attract attention. The light, passing fragrances in the air are all they need to do. You must have stood in a garden or forest early in the morning, when the air is still filled with dew, and took a deep breath, feeling the freshness of nature. The breezes carry the scents of plants, of earth, all of which are messages that trees want to send to you. You do not need to know exactly which tree this is, but you can feel the vibrancy and harmony they create. Fragrance is not just a pleasant sensation. It is part of the complex ecological system that trees have built to sustain their life. So how do trees create these fragrances? Each type of tree has a unique biological mechanism for releasing chemical compounds into the air. Trees can emit volatile substances, such as terpenes, a group of organic compounds that create the distinctive scent of the forest. These terpenes may be why you feel comfortable when walking into the forest, but they also serve a more important function. When trees release these compounds, they not only attract insects, but also help protect themselves from threats such as pests or other harmful factors. Therefore, the fragrance in the forest is not just part of communication with animals, but also a way for trees to protect themselves. Imagine you're lying in the forest, surrounded by towering ancient trees, and a gentle breeze blows through, carrying the fragrance of flowers and earth. You can feel every breath the trees take, as though they are talking to each other through this silent space. The fragrance is not random. Each scent is an invitation, a message from the tree to the creatures in the area. This is how trees connect with the world around them, protect and sustain their life through interaction with pollinating animals and even predator species that help eliminate threats. Not only do trees use scent to attract animals, but they can also use fragrance to bring about changes in the surrounding environment. When a tree senses changes in the climate, or when something alters in its environment, it can adjust the way it releases its chemical compounds in order to prepare for future shifts. Fragrance may be how trees prepare for upcoming challenges, or simply how they interact with their surroundings to sustain life. Fragrance in the world of trees is not just about being pleasant or sweet. It is part of the survival process, a smart strategy to attract animals, to protect themselves, and to maintain life in a constantly changing world. Trees are not just stationary beings. They are vibrant organisms that know how to communicate and use what they have to sustain life, protect themselves, and assist the surrounding community. So, when you lie in the forest with the air full of tree fragrances, remember that you are not just breathing fresh air. You are feeling the messages that the trees are sending to you. The breezes, the scents, the gentle movements in the air are all part of life in the forest. Each tree, each animal species has a role in this ecosystem, and they all use different ways to sustain life. Listen to the messages the trees send you through those fragrances, and let them help you relax, unwind, and let every breath of yours merge with the breath of the forest, leading you into a deep and peaceful sleep. When you have immersed yourself in the peaceful space of the forest, a place where trees, animals, and nature are telling you stories of life and existence, I want you to imagine something more, something you may not realize, but is incredibly important in every movement of the trees. It is an underground world, a hidden network beneath the soft soil of the forest, where trees and microorganisms in the soil talk to each other, share resources, and help each other overcome challenges. Imagine the tree roots as invisible cables connecting all the living organisms in the soil, where they can exchange not only what is necessary for survival, but also messages, invisible stories that you cannot see with your eyes. When trees communicate with microorganisms in the soil, it is a clever system that nature has created to sustain life, not just for each tree, but for the entire ecosystem. Let me lead you into the world of roots and microorganisms, a place where life is sustained through this delicate and special cooperation. When you think of the trees in the forest, you might imagine them as simply stationary beings, absorbing water and nutrients from the soil. But in reality, they do much more than that. Beneath the surface, in the darkness of the deep soil, there is a completely different world where tree roots not only absorb water, but also talk to the microorganisms in the soil through a very complex underground network. Trees and microorganisms in the soil form an inseparable partnership. Trees provide organic compounds to the microorganisms, while microorganisms help trees absorb nutrients more efficiently. It is a mutually beneficial relationship, where each party survives through connection and sharing. In this system, one of the key elements is mycelium fungi, delicate fungal threads that extend throughout the tree's root system. Mycelium acts as an underground internet, where trees and microorganisms can exchange information and resources. You can imagine these fungal threads like invisible cables, connecting every organism in the soil. A tree needs water, and it can send a signal through this network, and immediately, the surrounding trees will start sending resources to help. Or when a tree faces disease, the microorganisms in the soil will respond, providing compounds to protect the tree from pathogens. This is a form of silent communication, but incredibly powerful. Another example of this communication is when trees can detect changes in environmental conditions and respond through the root and microorganism network. When a tree is lacking water or nutrients, it will trigger a chain reaction in the soil, and the surrounding microorganisms will begin supplying what the tree needs. This shows that not only do trees know how to interact and help each other, but they also have a very special survival ability, helping them thrive in a complex and challenging ecosystem. So when you look down at the soil, do you see these things happening? No, you will not see the tiny mycelium threads or the tree roots extending through the earth, but trust that beneath the soft soil, trees and microorganisms are exchanging and helping each other, protecting life for the entire forest. They are not standing still. They are active, taking care of and assisting each other invisibly. And it is thanks to these connections that the forest ecosystem can maintain life in a stable and sustainable way. In such an environment, where every tree and every microorganism can help each other, I want you to imagine standing in the forest, beneath towering ancient trees. You cannot see all of this, but you can feel the vitality of the earth, of the roots stretching out beneath your feet. If you listen closely, you may feel the invisible connection between you and the tree, between you and the earth, between you and the natural world around you. That is the power of communication through the underground network, which sometimes we do not need to see or hear, but can feel very clearly. This communication system between trees and microorganisms is truly a miracle of nature. A tree does not exist on its own, but is part of a vast community where its life is intertwined with the lives of other creatures. Every tree knows that it cannot live alone. It needs to share resources, information, and life with other species. In a forest, trees and microorganisms not only help each other survive, but they also help maintain the balance and stability of the ecosystem. Imagine a quiet moment when you are lying in the forest and you can feel the strength of this connection. Beneath the earth, tree roots are communicating through a delicate network, and each tree knows that it has a role in this community. They are not solitary beings, but are essential parts of a vast ecosystem. The microorganisms in the soil also play an equally important role. They help trees absorb nutrients, protect trees from diseases, and together, they create an endless life cycle, sustaining the life of the entire forest. In these quiet moments, when you feel the intersection of tree and earth, you may understand more about the importance of this relationship. Trees and microorganisms do not exist for themselves alone. They exist for the entire ecosystem around them, for the sustainable life of all creatures in the forest. And it is thanks to these connections that the forest ecosystem can maintain balance and evolve over time. The forest is not just a place to seek peace, but it is also where you can find lessons about life, mutual support, and sustainability. Trees do not only live to exist, but they also know how to interact, share, and help other creatures in the community. Every time you step into the forest, you step into a world not only of trees, but also of invisible creatures communicating beneath the soft soil, keeping the ecosystem strong and bringing life to all species. After walking through the underground world of the forest, where trees and microorganisms exchange information, share resources, and protect each other, I want you to continue following this miraculous journey, where what you feel comes not only from your eyes and ears, but also from invisible elements like air and light. Imagine when you lie back and relax in the quiet forest. Each breath you take, the air is not just what you need to live, but it also carries a part of the life of the forest itself. And I want to take you to an interesting story, an important part of the tree's communication world, which is how trees absorb carbon dioxide and their impact on their growth. How do trees hear the air? And why do changes in the atmosphere deeply affect the life of the entire forest? Let's explore. Trees, as we know, live by absorbing carbon dioxide from the air and converting it into energy through photosynthesis. Each leaf, each blade of grass in the forest is a small energy factory, working tirelessly to sustain life, not just for themselves, but for the entire ecosystem. When you step into the forest, the air around you is not just stillness. It is molecules moving, exchanging, and trees are using them to sustain life. And do you know, it's not just simple absorption. Trees can respond to changes in the air, to the amount of carbon dioxide in the environment, and these changes can profoundly impact the forest's development. When the carbon dioxide in the air increases, how do trees respond? Trees absorb this gas through their leaves, and through photosynthesis, they convert it into food for themselves. However, when the CO2 levels become too high, trees have to adjust how they absorb and process it. This is not a simple process, but a strategy that trees have developed over millions of years to adapt to fluctuations in their living environment. When the CO2 in the air rises, trees can change the structure of the stomata pores on their leaves to adjust their respiratory process. This helps trees optimize their use of CO2 while minimizing water loss through the leaf surface. So, have you ever thought that trees can feel the changes in the air? When the carbon dioxide level increases, trees will react, not by moving or changing shape like humans, but by adjusting how they absorb the gas. This is part of the tree's biological intelligence. If the surrounding air contains a lot of carbon dioxide, trees will adjust their leaf system and stomata to breathe more. This is how trees protect themselves while maintaining photosynthesis, helping them grow stronger. But this does not only affect individual trees. When trees adjust to absorb more, they will begin to produce more, supplying more oxygen to the surrounding environment. When you stand in the forest, you are not just breathing air, you are breathing what trees have converted from atmospheric molecules, from carbon dioxide into oxygen. It is a delicate exchange that trees and we have with each other, a life that continuously evolves between all organisms in the ecosystem. Imagine you are in the forest early one morning when the sunlight begins to filter through the leaves and the fresh, cool air fills your lungs. Each time you breathe, you not only feel the freshness of the space, but you can also feel the changes in the environment, the shifts in the atmosphere around you. The trees are working non-stop to transform the air, to keep the forest vibrant, full of oxygen, and fresh. This is part of how trees sustain their lives, and how they protect and provide life for all creatures in the forest. In reality, when you stand in a forest, the air is not just composed of lifeless molecules. It is part of the marvelous photosynthesis process that trees are performing. And it is not just trees, but the creatures around you, the animals, the microorganisms in the soil, all contribute to changes in the air, to maintaining a healthy living space. Trees absorb carbon dioxide and create oxygen, but they also influence changes in the local climate, helping maintain stability in the ecosystem. Each breath of the trees carries an important part of the ecological cycle in the eternal life of the forest. But did you know that changes in the atmosphere, in the levels of CO2 in the air, can affect not just the development of trees, but the entire forest ecosystem? When the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere change, it is not just a shift that we can perceive through breezes, clouds, or even the weather. These changes also profoundly affect trees and how they grow. An excessive amount of CO2 can promote tree growth in the short term, but if it gets too high, it can disrupt the balance of the ecosystem, forcing trees and animals in the forest to adapt to changing living conditions. Trees do not just breathe the air to survive. They also help adjust their living space, modifying the environment around them to maintain stability. The consequences of climate change and the changes in the levels of CO2 in the air can lead to a series of chain reactions in nature. As trees grow stronger due to the abundant CO2, they may begin to alter the way they use resources such as water and light. This will impact other creatures in the forest and could lead to changes in how animals live and develop within the ecosystem. This is why understanding the impact of carbon dioxide on trees not only helps us better understand the growth processes of trees, but also raises awareness of the importance of protecting the atmosphere and the natural environment. When you lie in the forest, listening to the gentle sounds of nature, remember that the air you are breathing is the result of the wonderful process of photosynthesis that the trees are performing. Each of your breaths is not just simple life, but the continuation of a life cycle between you, the trees, and the surrounding environment. Trees not only help us breathe, but they also maintain climate stability, creating an ideal living space for all creatures. And every time you breathe, you are connecting with the forest, connecting with a great ecosystem through which life is maintained, protected, and constantly developed. As you begin to sense the subtle communication between trees not only through light, air, or passing fragrances, I want you to continue imagining, in that space, trees are not just living beings, but they also have the ability to respond in a very special way, reacting to dangers and events beyond their control. But what is fascinating is that trees do not only react alone, they know how to communicate with each other, sending out warning signals, calls for help, especially when they are injured. Let's explore how trees use their warning system, the nonverbal signals that help them deal with nearby threats. When a tree is damaged, such as being cut, broken, or attacked by pests, its first reaction is not to fight back in the way we might think. Instead, trees have a very special strategy to cope with these situations. They release a series of chemical compounds to warn not only themselves but also the surrounding trees. When a tree is injured, such as being cut or attacked by pests, it secretes a chemical called ethylene, a very powerful gaseous compound. This signaling molecule acts as a call to surrounding trees to prepare for the invasion of pests or any other danger. Trees do not need to move to protect themselves. Instead, they use ethylene as a call to send to other trees in the area. These nearby trees will receive the signal, either through the air or through the underground root system. Once other trees receive the message, they will immediately begin producing defensive chemicals to protect themselves from the threat. This process is like an invisible protective network that trees and the entire surrounding ecosystem have developed over millions of years. Imagine you are walking through a peaceful forest and you cannot see what is happening beneath the soil or inside the leaves. But you can feel a change in the air. Perhaps you do not know, but right now, the trees around you are talking to each other through the gases they release. An injured tree has sent a warning signal, and the other trees in the area will prepare to deal with any impending danger. Trees are not just protecting themselves, they are also helping each other through these chemical signals. This is a form of invisible communication, but extremely effective, allowing them to survive in a challenging and unpredictable world. And not only do these chemical compounds warn other trees in the area, but they can also affect other creatures in the forest. For example, insects may sense changes in the environment when trees release these warning compounds. Some insect species may come to the injured trees to continue their attack, while others may help the tree defend against pests, acting as guardians protecting the tree. This is part of the marvelous ecological cycle that nature has developed over millions of years, where every species has its own role in maintaining the balance of the environment. So, trees are not just passive creatures in an ecosystem. Trees have the ability to sense changes in the environment and respond very subtly to external factors. They can detect changes in the air, in the presence of threats, and use chemical signals to protect themselves and other trees. They do not need to speak, but through these chemical compounds, trees are talking to each other, helping each other in this fight for survival. One more wonderful thing is that this warning system not only helps trees fight against pests, but also helps them protect themselves from climate changes or even human impact. This system has been developed by trees over millions of years, and it allows them to respond flexibly to any changes in their living environment. They are not just passive beings, but they have a very powerful defense mechanism, one that not only protects themselves but also safeguards the surrounding ecosystem. So, can you imagine when you step into a forest and see the trees reaching out to the light? There is not just the simple life of each tree, but an entire underground protective system at work. The chemical compounds released are not just a physiological response, but an invisible conversation between the trees and the other creatures in the forest. When you stand there, you are participating in a great life that you might not see, but can feel very clearly. And when you lie down, breathing gently in the stillness of the forest, remember that each breath, each breeze that blows, could be a part of this communication. The trees are protecting themselves, and they are also protecting you. The trees in the forest are not just simple living creatures. They are friends, silent warriors in the natural world, helping each other and protecting the entire ecosystem from danger. Trees, with their ability to release chemical compounds when damaged, not only protect themselves but also help sustain life for other trees in the area. This is a process that we may not notice, but it is part of the beautiful life that nature has created. And when you lie between ancient trees, in the cool space, you can feel that the trees are doing everything they can to protect you, to protect life in the forest, and protect the very environment in which they live. Let these stories lull you to sleep, as a gentle reminder of the wonders of nature that we are lucky to live within. When we step into a forest, a world full of mystery and magic, the stories never stop unfolding. Trees, microorganisms, and all the creatures living in that space are silently connecting with each other, forming a network of support and helping each other. Today, I want to continue taking you on another journey, a part of the forest ecosystem that not everyone can recognize. This is how trees interact through the diffusion system, a form of non-verbal communication, but incredibly powerful. Trees do not only talk to each other through chemical molecules, but they also share resources, help each other when necessary, all through a complex system of underground connections. And you will see that while everything in the forest may seem still, in reality, each tree is doing its part to sustain life together. When we talk about diffusion in trees, you can imagine an invisible network, a supporting system beneath the earth, where trees do not live solely for themselves, but also help each other. One of the most important elements in this interaction is the root network. Tree roots are not just places where trees absorb water and nutrients from the soil, but they are also connectors, helping trees communicate and share resources with neighboring trees. In the forest, no tree is entirely independent. Each tree depends on others to survive, and vice versa. The root network forms a complex system where trees can exchange water, minerals, and important nutrients. Roots, especially those of large trees, can extend far, connecting with each other through an underground network. They are like invisible wires, bringing resources from one place to another. Imagine that beneath the earth, where you cannot see, there is a network of roots connecting millions of trees together. And like an information network, they share what they have, from water, light, to nutrients in the soil. If one tree is lacking water, it can ask surrounding trees for help by sending a signal through its roots to receive more water, and other trees will respond, sharing the resources they have, helping the thirsty tree overcome its drought. But it does not stop at just sharing material resources. Roots also play an important role in maintaining the balance of the forest ecosystem. They help prevent soil erosion, creating a sustainable layer of soil, helping trees grow strong and stable. What is particularly special is that when trees interact through the root system, it is not only the trees that benefit, but the entire surrounding ecosystem becomes stronger. Small animals, microorganisms in the soil will also benefit from this resource sharing. Roots can also create a support system to help microorganisms in the soil thrive by providing nutrients. This root network is especially important in sustaining the life of the forest, as it allows trees to support each other in extreme situations. You can imagine that when a tree is damaged, such as being cut or infected by disease, this tree will release signals not only to protect itself but also to send a message to the other trees. And through the root system, these trees can support each other by sharing nutrients and water to sustain life. From there, the entire forest becomes stronger, capable of resisting threats and maintaining the stability of the ecosystem. This is a very magical thing in the natural world. Trees, even though they stand still, do not live in isolation. Each tree is part of a larger community, and each tree plays an important role in sustaining the life of the ecosystem. When you step into the forest, you do not just see trees. You also feel the vibrancy they create through an invisible support system. That is the connection between trees, between animals, and microorganisms in the soil. Every species contributes to creating stability for this vast ecosystem. So, when you lie in the forest and feel the stillness of the air, imagine that beneath the soil where you are lying, millions of tree roots are connecting, exchanging resources, sharing life. With each step you take, each breeze that blows by, you are not just feeling the peace of nature, but you are also sensing the invisible life that is happening beneath the earth. Trees are not just standing still in space, they are actively participating in a lively life, helping each other and maintaining the stability of the entire forest. And you, in every breath, in every sleep, are a part of that life. Feel that connection, because you are part of the invisible conversation that nature has created. Let these images soothe you in each breath and allow yourself to completely relax, so sleep comes gently, like the cool breeze flowing through the leaves. Feel each moment of peace in the forest, where trees, though unable to move, can still send messages, share resources, and help each other. And thus, each time you breathe, you are not just living in the space of the forest, but you are also part of the wonderful story that nature is telling. As you lie in the peaceful space of the forest, feeling the breath of nature around you, another story begins to reveal itself in your mind. The trees, the invisible creatures beneath the soil, not only communicate with each other through the root network or chemical compounds. Trees also have another way of sensing changes in the air and the environment around them. And when the climate changes, when the environment is no longer the same, trees do not just react with natural responses. They must also change how they live, adapt to protect themselves and the creatures around them. Let me tell you about one of the special mechanisms trees use to adapt to changes in climate. How trees respond to changes in CO2 levels and how it affects life in the forest. When we think of trees, we often think of them as stationary beings that only need light and water to survive. But in reality, trees have a magical ability to adapt to their surroundings, especially when there are changes in the climate, in the air. One of the most important factors affecting the growth of trees is the level of carbon dioxide, CO2, in the air. You can imagine that just as we need air to breathe, trees also breathe the air, but not to supply oxygen to their bodies, but to take in CO2. And when CO2 levels rise in the air, how do trees respond? When the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere increases, trees breathe in more CO2 to serve the process of photosynthesis. This process helps trees create energy from sunlight, while also producing oxygen for the environment. But excessive CO2 can also cause unwanted effects. You can imagine that if the air around has too much CO2, trees will have to work harder to absorb and process this gas. This will affect the tree's physiological mechanisms, such as the development of leaves, roots, and even their ability to resist pathogens. While some trees may grow stronger with more CO2, this is not entirely beneficial for the entire ecosystem. Excess CO2 can disrupt the balance of the forest ecosystem, especially when trees start using this gas excessively. One of the most obvious impacts of changing CO2 levels in the air is the change in how trees use water and nutrients. Trees must not only deal with climate changes, but also maintain a balance between absorbing CO2, water, and nutrients to grow. With every breath a tree takes, the air around you will change. Trees do not just absorb CO2, they also respond to changes in the environment, adjusting their physiological mechanisms to adapt. When you stand in the forest, you may not see these changes, but in reality, trees are constantly adjusting to cope with environmental changes. The leaves may expand more to absorb light and CO2, while the roots may stretch farther to search for water in the dry soil. This is how trees continuously adapt to climate changes, an incredible survival ability that nature has bestowed upon them. Trees do not just respond to their surroundings in a simple manner. They have an amazing mechanism to maintain the life of the entire forest, keeping this space always full of life and energy. When trees absorb too much CO2, Not only they, but also other creatures in the forest are affected. The animals, microorganisms in the soil, and even other trees in the forest all have to change to adapt to this change. They may need to adjust their way of life, change their habits, or adapt to the new climate conditions that trees create. And so, a forest is not just a place of trees, but a place where all creatures can learn how to live, adapt, and change. When you feel the breath of the forest, you are also sensing the continuous change of the environment around you. You may not see that change, but you can feel it through every breeze, through the air you breathe, through the gentle movement of the leaves. And when trees adjust to adapt, they are helping each other and helping the entire ecosystem maintain life, protect the environment, and create an ideal living space for all creatures in the forest. Thus, the change in CO2 levels is not just a fluctuation in the air, but an important factor that helps trees and the forest ecosystem continue to survive and develop. And you, when lying in the quiet space of the forest, can feel that each tree is not just standing passively. They are changing, adjusting, and living flexibly to maintain the life of the forest. You, in every breath, in every sleep, are part of that change. Feel the eternal life of this forest and let it lull you into sleep. In the stillness and the wonderful adaptation of nature, let these stories of change, of how trees adapt to changes in climate and the environment, be something you carry with you into your sleep, like a gentle reminder of the miracles of nature, of the incredible survival abilities that each creature in the forest possesses, and of the miraculous balance we together maintain in this space. As you drift into sleep, surrounded by the peace of the forest, I want you to imagine something special. Throughout this journey, you've explored the world of trees through invisible communication, through chemical compounds, through underground root systems, and through the subtle reactions that nature has orchestrated. However, did you know that in the forest, aside from communicating with one another to sustain life, trees also use something very special to protect themselves, something that we may not always notice, but that plays a crucial role in protecting trees from diseases, keeping them healthy, and helping them thrive. That is scent, a natural weapon to fend off uninvited enemies, and an essential part of every tree's life. Let's explore how trees use scent to protect themselves, preserve their health, and safeguard the entire forest. When you enter a forest early in the morning, you may notice the characteristic scents of trees, the smell of pine resin, of damp earth, or of fresh leaves. But few people know that these scents are not just simple flavors in the air. They are part of a strategy to protect trees from diseases. Trees, like us, have enemies, pests, fungi, and bacteria that can harm them. However, instead of facing them head-on like other creatures, trees have developed an incredibly sophisticated defense system, releasing special scents to prevent disease. When a tree faces an attack from pests, rather than standing still and suffering, it may begin releasing compounds called terpenes, volatile compounds with distinctive fragrances. These scents not only attract beneficial creatures like pollinating insects, but also help the tree protect itself from pests. These compounds can reduce the growth of insects, preventing them from attacking or reproducing. What's more, these scents can also help the tree attract predators of pests, such as birds or predatory insects, to assist in the defense. This is a highly effective and entirely natural defense strategy that trees have developed over millions of years. What's fascinating is that each species of tree has its own unique scent, and each tree will release specific compounds to deal with different enemies. For example, when a tree is attacked by pests, it may release strong-smelling terpenes to call predators of pests to help. Some trees will secrete antibacterial and antifungal compounds to protect themselves from pathogens. Each tree is a natural producer, using invisible yet powerful weapons to safeguard its life and maintain stability within the forest ecosystem. Imagine that you're walking through the forest early in the morning, with mist lingering on the leaves. You breathe in the air, and you can feel the freshness of nature around you. The fragrances drifting through the air not only bring you comfort, but in fact, are telling you a story about life and protection. As you breathe in, you're not just inhaling the air, you're receiving signals that trees are sending to you. Messages of life, protection, and subtle defense in a challenging world. The fragrance of trees, aside from protecting them from disease, also plays a vital role in maintaining ecosystem stability. These compounds not only help the trees protect themselves, but also create a balance between species in the forest. When trees release these chemical compounds, they affect other creatures in the surrounding environment. Some insect species are attracted by the scent and come to pollinate the tree, helping it grow and reproduce. Predatory animals are invited to help reduce the number of pests in the area. From there, a perfect ecological cycle is maintained, where trees not only protect themselves, but also help sustain life for the entire community. Another interesting point is that trees can adjust their fragrance according to the situation. If a tree faces an attack from a specific pest, it can change the type of compound it releases, creating a new scent to adapt to the current danger. This shows that trees are not just passively responding to changes, but have an incredible ability to perceive and adapt to their environment. The change in a tree's fragrance may be a sign that life continues, an ongoing struggle between the tree and the challenges it faces in nature. This defense system not only helps protect the trees, but also protects the entire forest. When a tree releases a fragrance to warn other trees of danger, it not only protects itself, but also shields the entire ecosystem around it. Each tree is part of a support network where all the trees can help each other sustain life. This is the power of connection in nature, a subtle yet effective defense system that helps trees survive and thrive in a constantly changing world. And as you lie in the forest, in this still space, you can feel the vitality of everything around you. Every breath you take is not just fresh air, but the movement of nature, the sharing of resources and information that trees are exchanging. You may not see the signals trees send to each other, but you can feel them through the fragrance, through the stillness, and the vitality in the air. Trees are not just simple organisms, they are companions in the natural world, always knowing how to protect themselves and the entire forest, ensuring that this ecosystem remains stable and life endures. Let the stories of the tree's scent, these subtle defense strategies, bring you peace and relaxation. Feel the protection that nature has set in place for you in every gust of wind, in every breath. The trees in this forest are not just living for themselves. They are living and protecting the entire community, the whole nature, in an invisible but powerful cycle. And you, in this sleep, are a part of that marvelous world, where all creatures support each other, protect each other, and live and grow in perfect harmony. Having understood how trees communicate through scent and gases, and realizing that in the forest, everything is connected in such subtle ways, I want you to continue imagining yourself lying in the midst of that forest. In the stillness, there is an invisible vitality unfolding. Each tree has a story, a physiological response to external factors like light or climate. The trees in the forest do not just change when the climate shifts, but sometimes they also have a very special instinct to change how they absorb light, adjusting their living processes to adapt and grow stronger in this harsh world. It is in this change that trees do not just exist, but they are truly alive. Let's explore how trees talk through light and gases, how they react to environmental changes to sustain life. Over millions of years of evolution, trees have developed miraculous abilities to adapt to their surroundings, especially with light. You may have heard that trees need sunlight to carry out photosynthesis, to generate energy and sustain life. But did you know that trees don't just passively absorb light? No, trees can hear light and respond very subtly to its changes. Light is the most important factor for tree growth. However, not all trees require light in the same way. Some trees need a lot of light, while others thrive in the shade. When trees begin to sense changes in light intensity, they adjust their growth patterns. Trees change the direction of their leaves, the thickness of their bark, or even the development of their root system. These are all ways trees speak to light, requesting it to provide energy, but also asking it to listen to the conditions the tree needs. Imagine you are standing in the forest on a morning when the first light of the day begins to pierce through the dense canopy, creating shimmering beams of light on the ground. The tall trees stretch up, catching the light, while the smaller trees beneath the canopy extend their trunks toward the beams, as if trying to find the energy they need. This is a form of communication between trees and light. Trees are hearing light and responding, adjusting their bodies to adapt to the environmental conditions. The trees in this forest have the ability to sense the changing light and use it to grow, to reach upwards, searching for life. Trees have an intelligent system to maximize the light they receive. When trees sense that the light is changing, they adjust their photosynthesis processes to optimize energy production. Trees can change the direction of their leaves to capture more light, or even alter the speed of photosynthesis to produce energy. This shows that trees are not just standing still, they also have subtle physiological responses to environmental changes. Trees do not just wait for light to come, they actively adjust to optimize their absorption of this energy. Light not only affects tree growth but also has a profound impact on other creatures in the forest. Trees help create an ideal living environment for other species, from animals to insects, by adjusting the amount of light they need to grow. When trees change how they absorb light, they indirectly alter the environmental conditions for other species. For example, herbivorous animals will alter their habits to seek food, and insects will respond to changes in the light environment to find trees with attractive fragrances. Light also has another special role in the growth process of trees, especially in stimulating flowering and reproduction. Trees do not just use light to generate energy for life, but light also signals trees to begin their reproductive process. When trees sense changes in light during the spring or summer, they trigger flowering, starting the pollination and reproduction process. Light is the signal trees use to enter an important stage in their life cycle, marking the continuation of life and growth. So, when you lie in the forest, surrounded by the canopy, remember that the space around you is not just a peaceful and quiet place. Every tree is responding to the light. Every leaf is adjusting to absorb the maximum amount of energy from the sun. Light is not just what trees need to grow, but it is also part of the story that trees are telling. When you feel the gentle movement of the air, you are also sensing the continuous movement of trees, talking to the light, changing to align with the gifts nature provides. Each tree, in every moment, is living and changing according to nature's rhythm. And the miracle is, we can feel these changes, even though we may not always see them. Let the light in this forest lull you into sleep, like a gentle whisper, like an unwritten song, where trees and nature are singing the melodies of life. As you've now drifted into the peaceful space of the forest, where trees and nature are living vibrantly, I want you to continue exploring another aspect, a part of life here that we may have never noticed. Although we've seen trees interacting through light, gases, and fragrance, there's another miraculous aspect that few know about. That's the miraculous ability of trees to hear sound. You might ask yourself, how can trees hear when they have no ears, no eardrums? However, through recent studies, we've discovered that trees can actually sense sound and even react to it. Let's explore one of the wonders of the natural world, where trees not only hear but also respond to the sounds around them. Despite standing still in one place, unable to move like animals, trees are not solitary beings. In fact, within the forest, trees create an invisible network where they don't just live individually, but actually communicate with each other and support one another. Trees don't rely solely on themselves to survive. They live in an ecosystem where each tree contributes to sustaining life for all. One of the most subtle forms of communication among trees is through sharing resources, especially when faced with challenges such as a lack of water, light, or environmental threats. When a tree faces a shortage of water or light, it doesn't simply try to survive with self-protective strategies. Trees can also send signals through their root network and chemical systems, informing nearby trees of their current condition. A tree may change how it grows, alter the direction of its leaves to absorb more light, or even adjust the amount of water it absorbs from the soil. But what's especially remarkable is that trees can use chemical compounds to communicate with other trees, so they can support each other in seeking out resources. For example, if a tree senses a lack of water, it can release compounds that help surrounding trees adjust their root systems, ensuring that all trees can maintain life in a harsh environment. This communication system is truly miraculous because it helps all the trees in the forest not just protect themselves, but also overcome nature's challenges together. Imagine a forest where each tree is not an isolated entity, but part of a community, where all trees collectively face environmental changes. For instance, when one tree is attacked by pests, the nearby trees can begin releasing protective compounds to warn and protect each other. This is a very subtle, symbiotic interaction in nature, an unspoken but immensely powerful dialogue between trees. But it doesn't stop at resource sharing. Trees also help one another maintain the stability of the ecosystem. When trees absorb light, water, or nutrients from the soil, they're not only doing it for themselves but also improving the living conditions for other creatures in the forest. For example, animals such as birds, insects, and rodents seek life within the forest, and they benefit from the trees surrounding them. Trees not only provide shelter but also food for these animals, creating a vibrant cycle in which every organism plays a role. You may wonder, how do trees know when they need to help each other? In the world of trees, communication isn't always easy to recognize because it's not through words, but through a system of physiological, chemical, and physical responses that are quite complex. But whenever a tree senses a change in its environment, it has special responses. For example, when a tree is cut or damaged, it will release chemical compounds that send signals to surrounding trees, notifying them that a threat is approaching. The nearby trees will immediately respond by altering their growth patterns, or changing the structure of their leaves, helping to create a protective layer. Imagine lying in the forest at night, surrounded by sturdy trees, and you can feel that the life in this forest is not happening passively. Each tree plays a crucial role in the existence of the forest community, and in every breath, in every heartbeat of the forest, you can sense this unspoken connection. The trees are not just living for themselves, they are living for a greater purpose: the maintenance and development of the shared ecosystem. Trees help each other not only through resources but also through the chemical signals they send out, alerting and warning each other of potential dangers. Trees are not solitary beings in the natural world. They are important elements of a vibrant network, where every species plays its role. You are not just a passerby in this forest. You are part of a living system where every organism can learn, share, and support one another. Feel this communication, the invisible connection between you and the trees around you. Trees are not just living for themselves, but they are living and helping each other to sustain the life of the entire forest. The beauty of nature isn't just what we see, but the subtlety in how creatures support and help one another throughout the journey of survival. When you feel this connection, you'll realize that nature is not a passive world. It is a world full of life, communication, sharing, and protection. And as you lie down, let this communication lull you into sleep, so you can feel the tranquility of the forest, where each tree is an essential part of a living community, where each organism plays a role in sustaining collective life. After following the stories of trees through scent, light, and how they communicate with each other and their environment, you'll realize that the forest is not just a diverse ecosystem, it is a living masterpiece, where every organism plays a significant role in sustaining life. Trees, although standing still, have a strong, delicate, and miraculous life that's hard to imagine. But if we understand how they communicate, we'll see clearly that this communication is the core element that allows the forest to continue existing and thriving. In this final section, I want to invite you to reflect on something very important: the interaction between us and this natural world, and how we can contribute to protecting and preserving the magnificent forests we're lucky to live in. As you've seen in the stories before, trees are constantly changing and adapting to their surroundings, but they cannot protect themselves from all threats without help. While nature has created a natural support network between creatures in the forest, we higher conscious creatures can also do our part to protect and restore the forests we live in. So, what happens if we don't pay attention to how we interact with nature? If we don't understand the liveliness and delicacy of this ecosystem, might we unknowingly destroy the life networks that have been established for millions of years? When thinking about protecting the forest, you can imagine a world where everything is interconnected. A forest is not just a place where trees stand tall. It is a community where animals, microorganisms, and all other natural elements work together. Each tree doesn't just grow for itself. It shares resources, protects each other, and helps maintain the balance of the ecosystem. Trees communicate with each other through chemical signals, changes in photosynthesis, and even through alterations in light and air to protect each other from dangers. This is not just a simple interaction, but part of a vibrant system where all organisms contribute to shared life. So, how can we, humans living outside of this natural world, engage in its conservation and protection? To answer this question, we need to reflect on how we treat nature and the forests around us. If trees can communicate and help each other through invisible signals, Can we learn from and apply that connection in how we protect the environment? In reality, a crucial part of protecting forests is preserving biodiversity. Trees are not just simple organisms, they are essential in a long chain of ecological relationships. The forest is home to countless species of animals and plants, each playing a role in maintaining the balance of the ecosystem. When we destroy forests, it's not just the trees that suffer. The entire ecosystem is impacted. Trees not only provide living space for animals, but they also help maintain the climate, protect the soil from erosion, and regulate water in the environment. Losing the forest means losing all these invisible values. Protecting the forest isn't just about stopping deforestation. It's also about understanding how we interact with nature. If we view the forest as a living network, where every organism plays an important role, we'll see that forest conservation isn't just the responsibility of organizations or governments. It's also the responsibility of each individual. Reducing waste, limiting the use of unsustainable wood products, or participating in tree planting and natural habitat restoration are tangible actions we can take to protect the forest. But one more important thing is that we must realize that forests are not just a part of nature, but also a part of our lives. We may see the beauty and tranquility of the forest, but the forest is also a resource provider and a vital ecosystem necessary to sustain life on this planet. We may not directly live in the forest every day, but we are certainly greatly influenced by it. The winds, rains, and fresh air that we breathe are all created by the trees in the forest. Trees communicate with each other through chemical compounds, through root systems, through light, and even sound. But can we hear their messages? The answer is yes. We can hear them by caring for and protecting the forests around us, through small actions in our daily lives, through learning and raising awareness of the liveliness of nature. It is through understanding and loving nature that we will help create a world where trees are not only here to beautify nature, but are an inseparable part of life. When you lie under the shade of a tree, remember that every tree, every animal in this forest is contributing to the shared life. Feel the peace that the forest brings, but also don't forget that this forest needs our protection. Each of us can be a part of the long story of nature, helping to sustain life, protect biodiversity, and keep this planet beautiful. And as you drift into sleep, let the image of the forest comfort you, gently reminding you that we living creatures in this world each play a role in sustaining life. Trees can live and communicate with each other in ways we can't easily see, but that connection is always present, and you, in every sleep, are also a part of that story, a part of the ceaseless vitality that nature is telling us. You may close your eyes now and let your thoughts dissolve like mist. If your mind still wants to wander, let it continue the journey into the next video, where we dive deeper into the mysteries of the soul. But if your body is tired, let this sound lull you into sleep. No need to try, just breathe. And remember, everything you seek is already within yourself.